I'm Doug Sesserman, privileged to serve as the CEO of Americans for Ben-Gurion University. And today is hashtag Webinar Wednesday. We are so thrilled to have you join us today. We have more than 200 people that have registered for this webinar. We have 8 community partners who helped us get the word out. I want to start by thanking those community partners, the Aspen Jewish Congregation, the Aaron JCC in Dallas, Israel Bonds of the Southeast, the Oshman Family JCC in Palo Alto, Camp Young Judea of Texas, J Leaders in the Bay Area, the Jewish Federation of Greater Dallas, and Stand With Us in the Southeast region. Just thank you so much for helping us get the word out. The honest truth is today's webinar focuses on Ben-Gurion Day, which is held, it's a national holiday in Israel that's held every year on the 6th of the Hebrew calendar of Kislev, which commemorates David Ben-Gurion's death in 1973. We are talking about who Time magazine once called one of the most important people of the 20th century, the founder, first prime minister of Israel and namesake of our university, and who I lovingly, admiringly referred to as the #2 Jew all time. And today we have a really, really special treat for you on Ben-Gurion Day. Just so that you know, there is a ceremony happening right now on the university campus where the president of the university, the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, as well as the president of the university, of course, Professor Daniel Shamovitz, are honoring a number of award winners. There have been ceremonies happening throughout Israel. We're going to learn about some of that today, including Naftali Bennett, the prime minister, who visited this place that you're about to experience yourself. In all of my travels around the world, one of the most meaningful and inspirational places is the purpose of today's webinar. It's David Ben-Gurion's retirement home or hut in the Negev desert of Israel. And we have an incredibly special guest lecturer, docent, tour guide, Esther Suissa from the Ben-Gurion Heritage Institute that's going to lead us on this tour. But before we get started, I'm told that we have a pop question, a Zoom quiz for the audience. So let's roll with the question. Okay, audience. So where was David Ben-Gurion born? The numbers are coming in. Oh, that's we're going to end the poll now. And 92% of you were correct. David Ben-Gurion is born in Plonsk, Poland, and he moved in 1886. He moves to Israel 20 years later when he's a young man. It's David Green, and he becomes Ben-Gurion when he moves to Israel. I'm told we have another poll question for the audience. You're pretty smart on the first one. David Ben-Gurion was okay. I think we've got an educated and committed audience, Esther. 91% of this audience got it correct. 91% is correct. David Ben-Gurion was, yes, the founder and first prime minister. Absolutely a Zionist, although he, for those who've watched the epilogue movie, he refers to himself no longer as a Zionist, and Paula starts arguing with him about that. We could talk about that later. He is also a Negev resident, so he is all of the above. Okay, let's get going. What do you think? All right, so I'm going to introduce Esther. She's a little embarrassed about her bio, but she's really the docent of choice for this particular webinar. And by the way, don't forget to join us for our next one, where we're going to talk about BGU's New School of Sustainability and Climate Change. We are very excited about that that webinar, which we are going to try to explain how Israel, and in particular BGU, is paving the way in climate change solutions, not just for Israel, but for the entire planet. That will be on November 29th. So Esther Suissa is our docent. After making Aliyah from London in 1986, Esther Suissa went on to receive her BA and MA from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem in Jewish history and French literature. A longtime resident of Dimona, which is also in the South. She is now the head of the overseas programs at the Ben-Gurion Heritage Institute in Midreshet Ben-Gurion, the neighborhood just adjacent to where she currently stands. She was also held several positions at the Jewish Agency for Israel, the Sachnut, as well as the United Israel Appeal. She recently wrote an academic article together with BGU's own Paula Kabbalah, Professor Paula Kabbalah, on the boundaries between the government and the third sector in early Israel, soon to be published, I'm told, in the Israel Studies Review. Most importantly, Esther is married to Avi, and she is a mother to 5 Sabras, and recently became a grandmother. I understand that. Is that correct?
There you go.
Okay. I want to also thank, before we hand it over to Esther, Melody Machtarian, of course, our directors of events and experience, who without her help and David Ben-Gurion in Israel, we couldn't pull off these webinars. We have great people here in New York helping us, Leora and Ali and Yoni also in Israel. It took a village. It's while it's just a little after noon in the States, it's 7 p.m. in Israel. And we are so excited to get a glimpse into David and Paula Ben-Gurion's retirement home. Esther, why don't we begin with you explaining a little bit about the Ben-Gurion Heritage Institute, what the work of the Institute is about.
So thank you very much, Doug, for that introduction. Thank you to Melody for making this happen, and to Yoni, who's here behind the camera. And here we are. I'm from the Ben-Gurion Heritage Institute. We're the educational institute next to the Ben-Gurion Institute for Zionism in Israel, which is part of the university. We're actually not part of Ben-Gurion University. We actually sit above the grave site of David and Paula. We have our in-house jokes of how we meet at the grave site every day, and let's meet at the grave. So those are our internal jokes at the Institute. And we're here, in my opinion, at the magical time in a magical place here at the Ben-Gurion Desert Home after a hectic day of VIP visits. But I think this visit is actually, in my opinion, don't tell anybody else, it's probably the most important one. And thanks to the time change, the time zone differences, we're actually on her own, just Yoni and I, here in Kibbutz Sde Boker at David Ben-Gurion and Paula Ben-Gurion's home. And it's an honor. Thank you for the opportunity to let me show you around, to let us show you around. And follow me. Here we are. We're going to knock on the door, check if anyone's home. Hello, David, Paula, anyone home? No, I think it's. And here we are. So I think if we're talking about the importance of David Ben-Gurion, as Doug mentioned, today is his National Memorial Day, and in his will, he wrote that it's his wish after his death that the home and everything inside be open to the public, should be given with all the books and should be conserved. This is what we do. Our role is to preserve everything, to open it to the public. You're part of the public, so you're coming here. He also wished to be buried by Paula at the grave site in Midreshet, then called Sde Boker, and asked for no eulogies and no salvo fired over his grave. So today there was a ceremony there. We'll speak a bit about Paula if we have time. Paula died in January 1968, was buried, as Doug said, close by in the Midreshet Ben-Gurion, and David Ben-Gurion in 1973, today 48 years ago. So come and join me. In a regular year, we will have around 100,000 visitors. So this year hasn't been a regular year, but here we are. It's just you and us here at the home. And the added advantage is that we can both climb over. You can even climb over the ropes, which is something that you can't do if you are here physically, and we can see things close up. And I just want to start with the map, also because Doug said it's his favorite object in the home, but not just because of that, because look at the size of it compared to the rest of the house. It's David Ben-Gurion who decides what's going to be on display here, and he knows that people will visit his home. So look at the size of the map. It's basically the size of the doorway. If you compare it to the doorway, it's that size. And it shows how central the state of Israel was to him. It should be remembered that in the Declaration of Independence, the actual borders of Israel are not written, are not mentioned. And this was done specifically, this was done on purpose by David Ben-Gurion. And what we have here in the living room is actually a sort of mix and match. There's personal belongings, there's public, and immediately after the map, we have somebody you probably know quite well, Abe Lincoln, which here. Ben-Gurion was a great admirer of Abe Lincoln, and when we have groups of soldiers or even students, we speak about the common denominator. Both freed their people, and we'll see two other leaders here who did the same. So we've seen a map of Israel, Abe Lincoln, and then we go over to personal, a photograph of Ben-Gurion and Paula. They met actually in New York, in the New York Library. Maybe it's not far from where you are at the moment. They met there in 1917. The story goes that not only did
it's literally down the street. We're very close to the library.
I was told by a historian that one of the reasons why he spent so much time there was because it was free and it was warm. So that's where he meets Paula. They get married, and after a few weeks they separate and don't see each other for another year and a half. Paula is already pregnant with their eldest daughter, Geula, who we'll see actually in the next photograph. Ben-Gurion, Paula and David had 3 children. Geula, meaning redemption, Amos, named after the prophet, and Renana, their 3 children. And just to get a taste of who Paula was, when she gave birth to Paula, she writes to Ben-Gurion, who's actually in the British Army, and says, "I gave birth to a girl, despite the fact she looks like you, she's actually quite pretty." So that's Ben-Gurion, that's Paula for you. None of them moved to the Negev. I saw that in the poll you mentioned that he was a Negev resident. None of them moved to the Negev. They've all passed away, but today the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren came to the memorial service at the grave. So we have a mix here of public
I know
and personal.
There are seven grandchildren. I'm not sure how many great-grandchildren.
I think there are 9 great-grandchildren. One of his grandchildren is Alon Ben David. I think he lives in the States, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
I think so. I want to show you 2 things here. One is the telephone. For those who are my age, approximately, more or less, will remember the actual phone. For those under the age of 21, they think it's some kind of science fiction. Didn't know that once upon a time, you had to actually dial, and if you made a mistake, you had to start the whole dialing process from the beginning. So it's interesting for under 25s. For me, it's a bit of nostalgia. And here at the bottom, you can actually see a Chanukiah, or a menorah, which actually plays the Hatikva. He received it as a gift. We won't play it. It sounds a bit rusty. But just, you can see that it's a Jewish home. It's not a practicing home, but it's a Jewish home.
I'm
And
glad
yet-
you pointed out the phone. My understanding is he did not like to talk on the phone. In fact, if people wanted to talk to him all the time, and he said, if you want to talk to me, you need to come go for a walk. And he would go for a walk with people and talk with them.
He hated using the phone. And you mentioned, I think, Ben-Gurion epilogue. Perhaps some of you have seen, there's a famous, there's a clip where he just receives, and he said, it's called, this is my horrible present. I received this horrible present called the telephone. And, you know, it disturbs me because I want to read and I want to write. And today we all know how much telephones disturb us. But then absolutely, he was against telephones. And he was also against television, even though we have a television here, which he received as a gift. He said, television will destroy the younger generation. But as he received it as a gift, he felt obligated to leave it here for in case the donor came and wanted to see it. He very rarely, he didn't see television. He practically didn't see television, but it's still here. We have a photograph of Plato. So, as you said, he was born in Poland. He tries to study in Austria. He tries to go and study abroad, even in Poland. When you come, we have, I think Paula showed last year, we have a famous letter written by his father to Herzl asking for a scholarship so his very talented son can study in higher education, but he never finishes his high school. He finishes high school. He doesn't finish his university studies. He goes to Turkey in 1910 to study law, and doesn't finish his studying because of the First World War. He's fascinated by Greek philosophy, by philosophy in general, by history, and we'll see more about his obsession for books in the library. And around here we have gifts.
Yeah, even though he didn't go to university, he obviously a brilliant man. He spoke 6 languages, I believe.
That's correct. And he learns the languages in order to read. He wants to read books in their original language. So that was the main reason why he studied the languages. Some of them he spoke better than others. Yiddish he actually knew, but he preferred to speak less. He said everyone should speak Hebrew. He had English, French, Spanish. Spanish he learned from Yitzhak Navon, the 5th president. He learned Latin, Greek, and German. Russian.
I think he spoke a little French too, from what I understand.
He spoke a little French. He spoke French, definitely.
He tried to learn Arabic, but I don't believe he spoke Arabic. That's
right. He tried to learn Arabic. He was surrounded by those who knew Arabic very well. Moshe Sharet, who was the 2nd prime minister, was an Arab. He knew Arabic very well. He tried to learn Arabic, and he didn't manage to grasp it. That's correct. So those are his languages. We'll see some of the languages in the library. But here you can see this medley of different objects from his travels. He goes to Africa. He goes to the Far East. He's very interested in Eastern religions.
We're getting a question from
We
Ernie
have
Simon.
Buddha.
Did he speak Turkish?
So he learned Turkish in Saloniki in 1909. So he did learn Turkish in order to study. And he was fascinated by the Jewish community there, which was practically wiped out in the Holocaust. Yes, sorry. Thank you for reminding me. He also knew Turkish. That's correct.
So I think we're now up to like 8 languages. Okay, keep going. This is amazing.
Okay, so we have so on the one side we have Eastern religions. We have Buddha. We have the Burmese temple that he goes to visit Unu, the head of Burma, in 1961. There's an interesting connection between them. There's a friendship between them. In Ben-Gurion epilogue, you actually see it. We actually tried to connect to his daughter in Myanmar recently to have a joint virtual tour with the Unu Museum. Unfortunately, the situation there is not very stable, and we couldn't continue. But there's a great admiration in Myanmar also for David Ben-Gurion.
Can you pause right there for a second? Because this brings up something that Paula Caballo's taught me before around his ideology is really kind of a triangulation of biblical knowledge, although he wasn't that observant of a Jew, he was very knowledgeable biblically. Then he studied Western civilization and also Eastern religions and tradition. And that kind of altogether created his thinking. Sometimes he was asked, did you guide Israel well? And he would say, I don't know. I guided myself, and in guiding myself, I led Israel.
Right. Definitely. So it's a mix of Western civilization, Judaism, and especially the Bible is very central, and Eastern religions are very, he's very, very curious. He reads a lot about Hinduism. He reads a lot about different Eastern religions, and he learns meditation. We know that he meditates in Burma, and is fascinated by Eastern religions too. So in addition to that, going back to the Jewish part, we have a Chanukiah, and Hanukkah was probably his favorite festival. It fitted in with his narrative that it's the minority who overcomes the majority. It takes place in the land of Israel, as opposed to Purim, which he probably ignored. He actually didn't really know when Purim was because it took place outside the land of Israel. So Chanukiah is a very special festival for him. And Yoni is going to show us an unusual object, which wasn't actually here whilst he was alive. If anybody want to guess what it's doing here, you're welcome to. It was actually placed after he passed away.
If anybody wants to guess what that little bear is doing in David Ben-Gurion's retirement home, just click on the Q&A function and you can register your answer or ask a question. I think Yoni has stumped the audience with the bear.
Okay, so it was found after he passed away, probably left by one of the grandchildren, but one of the curators put it on the lampshade, and it sort of resembles his hair. It had, it resembles Ben-Gurion. So we thought we'd leave it as a humorous anecdote, but it did belong to the family, so it's still here.
Well, Jackie Goldstein, she just commented that the bear's hair looked like him, so she gets it.
So she got that. So she so when she comes to Israel, she has free entry to the home, to the desert.
Okay.
Home. Okay, that's our major prize. Here I just want to show us two things so that we have time for everything. Again, he receives many gifts. Here we have a gift from 1970 from the Jewish war veterans of the USA, and it's a quote from Micah. By
the way, we have a few people commenting that it's really a koala bear from Australia.
It's true. I was told koalas are not bears, but it's a koala, definitely. It's true. So this is a gift he received from Jewish war veterans, and I think also the quote is also very moving. It's a quote from Micah, the prophet, saying, "What does the God require of you? Only to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God." And I think he was very interested in the prophets. He spoke a lot about the universal message of the prophets, and I think this is an example, one of them. And here we can see a present he received from B'nai B'rit. You'll probably recognize it as a Jonah inside the whale. And they write to him and say, just as you saved the Jewish people by bringing them back to their homeland, so did the whale save Jonah. And he was very touched by this gift, so he kept it here.
Esther, Deanna Friedman, she's asking back to the menorah. There were figures on the menorah. Are those rabbis perched on top?
No, Maccabees.
Those are the Maccabees. They're the
Okay.
Maccabees. They actually, now that I think about it, they actually do look like rabbis, but they're the Maccabees. with their shields. I don't think they're rabbis. They're
The
Maccabees.
Hanukkah. Got it.
Thank you for that question. I just want to show you a picture of Paula, who was actually a nurse in New Jersey when they met. She gave up her career once she had children. She let Ben-Gurion advance his own, and she was always there for him. So this is Paula as a young nurse. She wanted to be a doctor, but wasn't able to afford the fees to be a doctor. And we have the Declaration of Independence, which was a gift from Golda Meir on his 80th birthday. Ben-Gurion and Golda Meir had their ups and downs, but there was a very genuine admiration between the two figures, and she felt that on his 80th birthday, the best gift she could have given him would be the Declaration of Independence. So it's in a very prominent place in the living room. Just to tell you something about how we preserve here, if you look at the curtains, after 48 years, a lot of the materials start to disintegrate. So what we did was we took a photo of the original curtains, sent it to the Shenkar, to the fashion college in Israel, and asked them if they could reproduce the pattern. And this is how we tried to maintain the same image. And I would say in general, 95% of what is here is authentic. It was here at the time. And we just replace what's broken, and we try and keep it as authentic and as genuine as it was. Even if you only can see, if you just even see the flooring, you'll see that if anybody knows Israel from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, this is what floors look like. And we only replace the tiles which are broken, so you can see newer ones and older ones, but we haven't refloored the whole home in order to keep it as authentic as possible. Wow, time is going, so let's see what I can show you during the time. I think this is an interesting picture. He received it as a gift in 1960 from a Haifa artist. It's actually three-dimensional. So if you look straight at it, it's the actual symbol of Israel, which Ben-Gurion is one of the creators. He's the one who decides what's going to be on the symbol of Israel. And if you look at each side, on the one side, you'll see a portrait of the figurehead of David Ben-Gurion. And on the other, if you only will go on the other side, perhaps somebody will recognize the second president of Israel, Yitzhak Ben-Zvi, a good friend of his. And, you know, in 1960, it looks very sophisticated, and yet it was made by a Haifa artist in the early 1960s. He loved it. He actually loved that image. And from here, we're going to walk into the library. Whilst Yoni is giving us showing us around, try and guess how many books are in the library. Take a wild guess. Perhaps that will tell us.
So we don't have anybody guessing the number of books, but I believe it's right around 5,000.
That's correct. There are 5,000 books here. There are 22,000 books in his Tel Aviv home. So the man who didn't finish his higher education in any college, he studies books. He's obsessed by books to the extent when he comes to the States in 1952, he asks for the bookstores to be closed for him. That's the only special request he asks for. He doesn't want a special hotel. He just says, let me go into the bookstore without anyone else so that I can enjoy at least an hour or two amongst books.
And so unlike some world leaders today that acquire their information and share it via Twitter, he's doing it the old-fashioned way. He's acquiring knowledge through books and communicating in long-form letters.
That's correct. And you can actually see we're in the middle of a project of classifying all the books. Up to now, we haven't had it in a very organized way. So there's someone who comes in every day, and every book is catalogued who it was given by, and this is why we have this table here. But above the table, and Yoni's going to go over the ropes, you mentioned the second greatest Jew. So here is perhaps the first greatest Jew. So opposite his study is the Michelangelo statue of Moses, who he considered, Ben-Gurion considered the greatest Jew who ever lived. So Ben-Gurion is sitting in his study, and he's seeing Moses above him. And when he received once as a gift a statue of his head, he said, I can't have my statue and Moses in the same room. It has to be in another room. He didn't see himself fit to be in the same room as Moses. But here we have his very simple desk, his very simple chair. Believe me, I've sat on the chair. It's a very, very uncomfortable chair. I always joke that my children have much more luxurious chairs for their studies. And this is where he spends most of his time. He has psalm books. He has a Hebrew English dictionary. He has the Bible. He has his famous glasses, which I am told are in fashion today. He has the photograph of the Declaration of Independence, and also some personal photos of the grandchildren, the children, and behind him we have two statues. One is a small Buddha, we'll see in a minute, and the other one is Zenon, another Greek philosopher who we admired a lot. And that's again something that he was very interested in. As we said, he didn't like television. He doesn't sleep a lot, and that's what we're going to see in the other rooms. He spends most of his time here writing letters, writing books, responding to letters. We have a whole lecture we have thousands of letters that he received from citizens, from people from abroad, from leaders, and he tries to answer as many as possible personally. We also have that. And he listens to the radio, not necessarily to music. I gave this talk to a group of Canadian children, and they thought this was a suitcase. So it's not a suitcase, it's a radio, even though it's a very, very large radio. So he was listening to the news, he tried to get BBC World Service. Sometimes he was able to receive it, sometimes he wasn't. But I can say that the books around here are on every subject that you would read. There's history and geography and physics and science. We joke that there are no cookery books, very, very little art, and even sports, not so much, even though we did find a book here. I can actually show you. I'll ask, we actually have here Yoga for Americans. So if anybody wants to learn yoga, this is the book for you. He had Yoga for Americans and Judo. But otherwise, the books that he had, we also joke that there are already books about Ben-Gurion. So even whilst he's alive, there are already biographies being written about him. I think it must be quite strange to read about yourself whilst you're still around. So that must have been interesting. We're going to move to the private quarters, because I know that I could go on forever. You mentioned that he was born in Plonsk. So this is really the only photo, the only picture we have from the synagogue in Plonsk. As you said, he left at the age of 20. His family, his mother died when he was 11 years old. His family come to Israel, come to the land of Israel in the 1920s, and they joined him there. And now for the private quarters, we have 2 bedrooms.
Esther,
you will tell me, yeah.
Esther, we're getting a question from Nancy Sharp. She's a friend of mine, actually. Thank you for joining, Nancy. Nancy's wondering if he read fiction or just mostly nonfiction.
Mostly nonfiction. There's practically no fiction. That's an important point, actually. We've looked. There is some in his Tel Aviv home. Everything had a practical purpose. He read books in order to advance in a certain way, in order to learn more, in order to improve his vision, in order to find inspiration, and in order to advance the cause. So very little fiction. Thank you for that question. And here we are in one bedroom, and here I have to take my shoes off because otherwise our director will tell me off for standing on the carpet with my shoes on.
David and Paul sleep in different bedrooms, right?
They did indeed. So here you can probably guess, this is more of a feminine room. There are pictures of the grandchildren, the great-grand, the children. There's even an interesting picture of Ben-Gurion, an unusual picture of Ben-Gurion hugging one of his grandchildren, which you don't usually see. And this was Paula's room. There were only 2 bedrooms, which meant that if a guest came, for instance, when the United Nations Secretary General came, Paula gave up her room. She went to stay with a friend in the kibbutz and gave her room to the visitor. Ben-Gurion wasn't really interested in the logistics of things, but Paula was here, mainly because the reason why, and many soldiers say, how could they not, why did they not share a room? And the reason why he didn't sleep, he slept very little. And secondly, it's very customary at a certain age, at least in Europe, to have separate rooms, and it doesn't really. The soldiers still don't understand it, but that's the way it was. And I always say my parents also, at a certain age, had separate rooms. Before we see David's room, I want to show you the kitchen. Quite unusual to have a kitchen in the 1950s, in 1950s and 60s. Very small. It said that Paula actually found the table in the street in Tel Aviv and asked it to be brought back. So she saw the state of when they came in 1953 and saw the state of when she saw the state of the kitchen, she insisted on having a kitchen, that she would make all the food, and she would cook for Ben-Gurion. So there's a stove.
They didn't eat in the dining hall with the other members of the kibbutz?
So actually, David liked eating in the dining room. When Paula went to see the children and the grandchildren, he would definitely eat in the dining room. She was very, very worried about his health, so she insisted when she was here to make his food. She was there less. But he actually liked it. He liked mixing with the younger people, liked mixing with the kibbutznikim. There are 2 sinks. There's a tea set. You can't be a Polish family without a proper tea set. And we have the famous, we have a bell.
Call David when he's.
So call David when it's tea time. And we even had a ninja. A few weeks ago, I gave a tour, and the Canadian kid said, look, he even had a ninja. So of course it wasn't called a ninja then, but they had a blender, quite unusual at the time. And this is where Paula made his favorite shake. It wasn't actually his favorite shake. He actually didn't like it so much. It was made out of yogurt, white yogurt, raspberry syrup, apple puree, and a raw egg. We actually made it today and handed it out to the visitors. It wasn't very well, except it's not the tastiest thing, but apparently it's healthy. And even when she passed away, after she passed away, he insisted on having it made. We even have the recipe here, together with all the list of his medicines and the famous kuchmuch. So if you're interested in, I'm sure it's online, to make kuchmuch, it's the smoothie, the Ben-Gurion smoothie, which he had.
Esther, we're getting a question from Larry Rosner, who has visited the home before. He says, thank you for this tour. He just wanted you to comment a little bit on the square footage, the humbleness of the place, and how it really looks like just everybody else's home on the kibbutz.
So it's interesting. In the one way, it is modest. It's actually, I mean, you'll notice there are 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, so it's actually bigger than the average kibbutz home. Of course, for a prime minister, it's very modest. But proportionately, let's say if I compare it to an average kibbutz home at the time, it was bigger. I mean, it was understood that visitors would come to visit Ben-Gurion, so it was important that he had room for guests, but it was still modest.
The humility of his life is in many ways one of his signature leadership qualities.
Yes.
He didn't lead his life for himself. He was leading
Right.
Israel and the Jewish people.
He had no interest. We'll see. He had very few clothes. He wasn't interested in material possessions at all, apart from books.
Okay, I know we're starting to run out of time. Show us the globe.
So we have the globe, which is very disproportionate to the size of the rest of the home, and you can actually see how tall he is by this photo of Ben-Gurion standing with his back to the globe. So first of all, the globe shows how well aware of world events he was, and he was around 5 foot. So this short man, this short great man, this short tall man was actually very small. And people didn't really see him because
Dr. Ruth K. Westheimer, I don't know if you're familiar with her, Esther, but she received an honorary doctorate from Ben-Gurion University last year.
Really?
She's on our honorary board of directors. We're very close to Dr. Ruth. And when speaking about Ben-Gurion, she reminds everyone that size does matter. In his case, it was the size of his brain. And
wow.
At 5 feet short, he was a giant of a man.
Absolutely. If you're actually speaking about the size, his head, they had to make him special hats because the average size of a hat didn't fit his head. So they had to make him special hats. So he was very short with a big head. That was true. So we're going to finish off in his bedroom, which I think sums it all up because it's very simple. There are more books. I don't know how many books you have in your home. Next to my bed, there are 2. Here there are 40. So there are books on Chaim Weizmann, even Mao Zedong, the Little Red Book of Mao Zedong, and the book which was opened before he just went downhill is O Jerusalem in French, which he was reading, the Scientific American. You can see there's just a whole width of books. Very simple bed, simple slippers. There is a safe for documents, not for money. And as you said, that he has very little. He has his khaki suit. Again, this is something we don't show on a regular tour, but this is what he felt the most comfortable in. He liked walking in his khaki suit, but of course, he had suits for his special occasions. And of course, when he went abroad, we recently had them all in order to keep them as they were. So we try and keep them as preserved as possible. And he still has a British Army jacket. So don't tell the British Army because it's still here. And he used it in the winter here when it became very cold.
Something tells me you snuck that in there since you're from London.
No, I did not, actually. I didn't. And I think the only photograph he has in his room is of Mahatma Gandhi. Again, the original painting is being repaired and preserved at the moment. But I think it's very symbolic that the only picture he has in his room is not of the family, not of a Zionist leader. It's of Mahatma Gandhi, who actually had quite controversial views towards Judaism and Israel. Yet when he speaks about non-violence, Ben-Gurion says, the moral strength of the East is perhaps embodied most of all in the great Indian leader, Mahatma Gandhi, the outstanding man, whose weapon for this is non-violence. And I think he was so attracted to that, and he spoke about the Salt March, that he decided to put that letter on, that picture on his room. And I think altogether you could just get I hope you've been able to get a touch. We were able to, we can't transmit the smell, but we've tried to give you a sort of feeling of what it's like here. Visitors have been coming back, and for us it's been very moving. Are there any questions you'd like to ask before we finish off?
So I think we're wrapping up. First of all, Michelle Wilner comments that she just says, this is so fascinating. Thank you so much. She greatly appreciates this and wants to try to get in touch with you, Esther, when she brings her family back to Israel.
Please come. As I said, whoever answered the question correct will just tell us, and they have free entry into the home.
So if you have questions for the audience has any more questions, click on the Q&A function. We're basically out of time, so we're going to take maybe just a couple questions, then we'll wrap it up. This has been really, really special. By the way, the audience held the entire time, Esther, and the questions are like starting to come in in big numbers. So let's see. Harriet Meyer is asking, there are no curtains on his bedroom windows. No wonder he didn't sleep. So she's making a comment. Yeah,
it's interesting news. She mentioned the windows. The windows, maybe Yoni will just show us the height of the windows. They were built especially so that they would be above his height. So it's a security measure so that there wouldn't be any, God forbid, if there was an assassination attempt, they wouldn't be able to get to his height. I hadn't really thought about it, but it's true. There were no curtains.
Men don't need curtains.
So Yoni said
thank you, Yoni. We've got an important question coming from Lilia Van Gelder. She's asking, was he actually a member of the kibbutz?
He was definitely a member of the kibbutz. The story goes that when he asked for the first time to come in October 1953, the vote actually voted against. He was already 67 years old. Paula was 62. The average age here was about 22. And the first time he asked to join them, they actually voted against it. And it was only the second time where Ben-Gurion is very stubborn and said, maybe you'd like to reconsider your decision. And the second time they accepted him as a member, a full member. And when he came in December 1953 with Paula, he became a member of the kibbutz. He was here until 1955, went back as prime minister, and finally retired here in 1963 until he passed away in 1973. So definitely he was a full member.
Rabbi Brian Searle is asking, how far is Sde Boker from Ben-Gurion University? And I changed the virtual background so you could see a map of Israel. BGU has 3 campuses, Beersheba, Sde Boker, and Eilat, because we're Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. Kibbutz Sde Boker is just down the street from the Midrasha Ben-Gurion where Esther lives, which is also, we refer to as Sde Boker. And so literally maybe a quarter mile from our Sde Boker campus, where the Blaustein Institute for Desert Sciences and also the Institute for the Study of Israel and Zionism and the Ben-Gurion Heritage Institute are all at Sde Boker. And then our third campus is in Eilat. Sde Boker itself is about a 45-minute drive from Beersheba.
That's correct. And the roads are getting better. They're improving the roads, so it's hopefully it'll take even less time.
Very good. Okay, so we have some more questions. We're going to do our best to get them to you and provide answers, but the audience held most of the comments coming in, echo the appreciation. So I think you really did a great job. Ellen Marcus, whose parents' name is on, and Ellen herself, the Marcus family campus in Beersheba, which is the incredibly transformative, largest gift ever to the state of Israel. It's helping us.
It's very well known. You know it very well. You've seen it. Thank you.
She says thank you, as do many others. So I think we're going to close with one final poll question, which is a quote. Which of these quotes is attributed to David Ben-Gurion? Please click on your answer. Wow, so this is one smart audience. 98% of the participants accurately attributed this quote of the future of Israel will emerge from the Negev. Jerusalem, which is a wonderful place to visit, gets 2% of the vote. And Tel Aviv, which is also an amazing place to spend time, didn't get any votes. So yes, the audience knows what they're talking about. The future of Israel will emerge from the Negev. And on hashtag Webinar Wednesday, our job is to just give you a glimpse into the remarkable work of Ben-Gurion University in the Negev in the realization and always pursuit of David Ben-Gurion's dream for the Jewish people and the Jewish state. So Esther, thank you so much for joining us. One of my personal goals is that David Ben-Gurion Day shouldn't just be an Israel national holiday. It should be something that we're celebrating around the world. And while he didn't like the telephone and certainly would not have appreciated social media, is my guess.
Absolutely.
I think he would be incredibly proud of you and our use of technology to share this experience around the world with you doing it live from Israel via modern day technological capabilities. So thank you just so much.
Thank you very much, Doug. I'll just say that in 1930, he actually wrote a letter to Paula, and he said, one day in the future, two people will be able to be in two different parts of the planet on different types of Earth, and they'll be able to see each other and talk. So he actually foresaw it, and here we're doing it. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I completely agree that it should be designated even outside Israel as well. And thank you for making this happen.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So for those who want to get more involved with us, please do spend time on our website, www.americansforbgu.org. We call our idea, our branding effort is to try to really start a movement to be partners in the remarkable work of Israel as manifested through the great university, Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, and all its amazing work it does in education and research and uplifting the community and really the region, the entire Negev region. So thank you so much. And with that, Esther, Laila Tov.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yoni.
You're welcome.
Toda rabah. And everybody, stay safe and be healthy. Thank you.